Hello, U.S. history students. What we're working on this week is a little unit on imperialism. Now, I kind of defined imperialism with the last lesson. We talked about imperialism in the United States, specifically the fact that the U.S. it prides itself in saying that it doesn't have an empire, but it definitely engages in imperialistic activities. And we looked at some examples of that. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to review all that, okay? And what we're going to add to it is identifying these places on a map. In fact, that's where we're going to start off first, is identifying these places on a map, okay? You can take your own notes if you want to. I would use the worksheet that I provided for you simply because it's got the map on it, okay? And I know you can do text box and things like that and label the places on the map. So here we go. Let's go through this map first, and then we'll review what we talked about previously, okay? Now, we're going to start, okay, hopefully with an easy one, the United States. All right, the United States is right here. Okay, it's in North America. You've got Canada up here, Mexico down here, and the U.S. is right here in the middle. Okay, then let's talk about some important bodies of water. All right, we've got the Pacific Ocean over here, and that expands across the entire width of this space right here, from the United States all the way over here to Asia. This is the Pacific Ocean. Okay, on the opposite side, you've got the Atlantic. Okay, here's the Atlantic Ocean over here. All right, then back to some land masses. Asia over here, okay? Now, these are kind of the big picture items. Now we're going to get into some more specifics, okay? For example, in Asia, we've got this big country right here, all right? And this is the country of China, all right? And I labeled it red because I'll be honest with you, China is communist. Red is the color of communism. Now, that hasn't happened yet in the course of our story, but that's why I chose red for China right there. But China is in Asia right there, okay? Now, let's talk about this little dot right here in the middle of the Pacific, okay? This is actually a string of islands, okay? This is Hawaii, all right? There's Hawaii right there in the center. That's a magnified view of it. I know that on your map it's a little dot, but that is Hawaii right there in the center, okay? Then let's move over here to these two areas right here. Again, there's a string of islands right there. There's a single island nation right there. This is the Philippines. This is Guam. Okay, Philippines and Guam, they're over there in Asia as well. All right. Now let's jump across over to the Atlantic. Okay, and we've got this country right here and this island nation right there. All right. This is Cuba. All right. And then down here we've got Puerto Rico. Right? And we'll review all these and why these are important here in just a second. Okay. Then last but not least, down here, all right, this country right here, more specifically, that little black slash right there, okay, this is Panama, pointing specifically to the Panama Canal. Okay, so here's Panama, and then that little black slash right there, there's the Panama Canal. Okay. And then this whole area from Mexico down to South America, this is Latin America. Okay? So we got the U.S., Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, all right? Over here, Asia, specifically China. Here's the Philippines. Here's Guam. Here's Hawaii, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Panama, and I'm just going to throw this out there. Up here is Alaska. All right. And we'll talk about Alaska as well. All right. Now let's review the material that we talked about in the last lesson. First off, imperialism. Okay. Imperialism is about stronger nations extending control over weaker nations. Now, when we use this definition, again, America prides itself in saying we never had an empire. But when we use this definition, we definitely got involved in some imperialistic activities. And that's what we're going to look at here in the next few minutes. Okay, so imperialism is when stronger nations extend control over weaker nations. How does the United States do that? Where does the United States do that? All right, well, let's go back to the map and talk about the map a little bit. We're going to start with China. Okay, remember China China used to be divided up into spheres of influence. You had these specific countries that could trade in specific areas. Well, no more of that. The United States wants China to have an open door policy, okay? Open trading rights. Everybody can trade with China, all right? You don't have to have a specific area to go in. Anybody that wants to can trade with China, all right? Because we want China as a market for U.S. goods, okay? So that's how we do with China, or that's what we do with China. Hawaii, all right. Remember, Hawaii had sugar. We were having to pay taxes on that sugar because we were importing it because Hawaii was not part of our country. Hawaii was controlled by the Queen, Liliuokalani. The United States helps the Hawaiians revolt against the Queen. Then we kind of take over, and Hawaii becomes a territory, so we don't have to pay taxes on that sugar. Okay, U.S. helps overthrow the Queen because of sugar. 1898, Hawaii becomes a U.S. territory, and of course, we know later on in the 50s, Hawaii is going to become a state. All right, but it all has to do with taxes and sugar. Panama. Okay, Panama. What do we do in Panama? Well, remember, Britain had come over, France had come over. They had tried to build a canal in Panama. We would like a canal to shorten the distance between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So we kind of helped Panama overthrow Colombia. Colombia had been controlling Panama. And in return, Panama is going to allow us to build the canal. And of course, Teddy Roosevelt is the president. Teddy Roosevelt is going to start that project. It'll be finished during the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, and it will cost $380 million. We're going to build that canal straight through Panama, connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific. Cuba. All right. Once again, Cuba has sugar. We really are importing a lot of sugar from Cuba. We want to protect the sugar plantations there. Cuba is tired of being controlled by Spain, so we kind of talk Cuba into revolting from Spain. Now we say we're not going to get involved yet. We send some ships down to protect those sugar plantations. And okay, one of those ships, the USS Maine, is going to explode, and then we will get involved in the war with Spain. But with Cuba revolts against Spain. We're interested because of lots of sugar. You have the incident with the Maine explodes, and then we're at war with Spain as well. Okay. Now, when the war is over, a couple things happen. Number one, Cuba is not thrilled because now all of a sudden we're the power, okay, in Cuba, not Spain. And a bunch of Cubans are like, hey, we traded one power for another. So that's going to lead to some tense relations down the road. Since we're on the winning side, though, we're going to get a lot of land. That's where Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico come in, okay? They are annexed or added to the U.S. as territories after the Spanish-American War. Spain just gives us Puerto Rico and Guam, and then we pay $20 million for the Philippines. But again, this is us exerting our force, exerting our pressure, because had we not won, we would not have gotten those territories, okay? And then last but not least, Latin America. We talked about the three different types of diplomacy. We've got big stick diplomacy, which is the use of force. We've got dollar diplomacy, which is the use of money. In a way, it's kind of like we're buying our friends. And then you have moral diplomacy, which is, hey, let's just be nice. Okay, let's take the high road and use our superior morality to attract people to us, okay? Well, in Latin America, it's all about the dollar diplomacy, okay? Taft is the president. Taft wants to invest a lot of money in Latin America to help Latin America improve its conditions, improve its economy, improve its social structure. And the idea is if we invest all this money, then who is Latin America going to be friendly toward? Us, the United States, okay? Who might they trade with? Us, the United States, okay? Because we've invested so much in them, right? Now, before we wrap up here, a couple of other little points, a couple other concerns to talk about. Number one, let's remember Alaska, okay? Originally 1867, it was called Seward's Icebox or Seward's Folly. It was seen as a wasteland. Over time, though, we begin to appreciate the purchase of Alaska because it is rich in timber and oil and natural resources, okay? So Alaska turns out to be a very, very good purchase down the road, okay? Also, the term annex, that simply means to add, okay? Especially to add territory. So when you hear the term annex, we're just talking about adding territory to the United States. Yellow journalism. This is going to be a key concept in the Spanish-American War, okay? Because I told you the Maine blows up. We're not quite sure what happened with the Maine. Chances are it was a boiler explosion on the ship. But when the journalists get the story, they're going to say it was a torpedo from Spain, okay? It was a torpedo from a Spanish warship. That's what blew it up, and that's why we need to get involved in the Spanish-American War. So yellow journalism is when journalists embellish stories. Somebody asked a couple weeks ago when we were talking about working conditions and we were talking about muckrakers and things like that. Muckrakers can get involved with yellow journalism. Okay, sadly, they can embellish things, trying to expose the corruption and expose the problems in society. Okay, so muckrakers can get involved with yellow journalism, with this just embellishing the story. And then our reasons for expansion, we talked about this. I mean, I think it makes common sense. They're economic. That's why we want to get involved with China. We want to trade more. We want an open market for our goods. We want to show our military strength. That's what we were doing with the Spanish-American War. That's what we were kind of doing with Hawaii. There's this belief in racial superiority, okay, especially in terms of morality. That's what that moral diplomacy is all about, okay? We are racially superior because we have better morals than you, and you need us to help take care of you, okay? A famous author, Rudyard Kipling, referred to it as the white man's burden, okay? We've got this great sense of morality, this great sense of right and wrong, and we need to protect these weaker countries that don't have that. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we talk about racial superiority. And of course, we want more resources. We want to spread our culture. We want to show our strength. All of those are all mixed in together, and they tie in to the economic reasons, the military reasons, and the belief in racial superiority that we just talked about a second ago. Well, that's it for imperialism, okay? Review this material. There's a little quiz on the map, including locations, so be sure you go back and you look at those locations on the map. It's not open notes, okay? Since we're kind of pressed for time and there were only 2 lessons in this unit, I'm not going to do another unit test on imperialism, but the stuff on imperialism will be on our World War I test. Now, previewing the last lesson for this week, okay, we're going to get into World War I. What happens is you have all these countries industrializing. That was the last unit, okay, and they're building up their technology, and some of that technology they're building up is weapons. And you've got all these countries involved in imperialism because they think they're the better country and they're competing to exert their influence over these smaller countries. Okay, well, there's only so many smaller countries out there. So if you think you're the bigger country and you're trying to dominate these smaller countries, and there's only so many smaller countries out there, and you've got this stockpile of weapons, that's bound to lead to conflict, and that's bound to lead to war. And that's exactly where we're headed with World War I. Okay, so check out that last lesson this week on World War I. No quiz with that one, okay, but it will pave the way for where we're headed before spring break, which is we are going to be fully engaged with World War I.